What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, concluding my deep dive into UFO studio albums. Recently got into UFO. I've always known about them my whole life, but I've recently just done the deep dive. Gonna finish off the 9 albums they did from the 90s and beyond. I already did the covers album in my covers album series, which was officially their last album. As far as these albums go, there's 9 of them. They're all hard rock. You know what you're gonna get. They don't mix it up. No wheels are reinvented. They're not flirting with hip hop or with any new sounds, or other than maybe some 90s bad drum sound seeping in. This is about as consistent as a band as you're going to get as far as what they deliver musically. That's both a blessing and a curse, and that it's literally, oh, hard rock, hard rock, hard rock, hard rock. Not going to talk about any given album too much because they're kind of all the same, other than different guitarists, different band members. Phil Mogg's going to be there the entire time. Maybe it's going to get a little bit bluesier with certain guitarists. But for the most part, it's 9 albums that are like, at times delivering generic hard rock. Almost everything sounds like 80s or 90s hard rock all the way through like the 2000s. And I think the stuff at its best sounds like 70s hard rock. So definitely not as good to me as the stuff in the 70s or those first 3 80s albums. There are moments on each album that are pretty good. But yeah, it's not a rough listen, but there's not a lot of surprises in these 9 albums. I'm going to go from 9 to 1, rank those, and then I'll put that list with all the others. So we'll have a complete list when we're done. All right, that's it. Let's get on to number 9. My number 9 is their 1992's High Stakes and Dangerous Men. This is the only album with guitar player Lawrence Archer. He's a shredder, 100% a shredder. I think out of all the guitarists they had, Vinnie Moore, Schenker, Archer, Chapman, I think Schenker is just something about him and the way he fits in with this band and the way he's like integrated into every song just stands out from the others. I thought Chapman did a pretty good job of being more of a Schenker. Archer, I think, is the most like, I'm here to do these solos and to shred. Vinnie Moore is hit and miss for me as far as how he integrates in with the band. But this one, it just seems like we have a song, Lawrence shreds, we go back to the song. A lot of sort of derivative stuff on here. It's a much more bluesier sound. Like the first track, Borderline, it was like, who the heck is this band? Is this even UFO? Very bluesier hard rock. Some of the songs, like there's a song called Revolution, which has like, it starts with this big Who vibe and then goes into what almost sounds like a Kings of Leon vibe. Like we're Kings of Leon fans of UFO and took their sound from there. There are songs that kind of remind me of like a Southern rock, almost flirting with a Widespread Panic vibe. There's a little bit of like a Seeger, John Cafferty vibe on some of these songs. It's just some of the music it's still got this hard rock at its core element. There's also elements of ZZ Top that start to seep in, almost like an Eliminator sound. This is 92. The drums sound bad. There's some really bad synth sounds. This is probably the one album that sonically is just like, the loud, sort of oversaturated 90s production does not do well. It's just some generic kind of hard rock. I think Ain't Life Sweet, kind of an early Aerosmith sort of Boston boogie type song, is pretty cool. The Shredding Works, a really fun song. And then I think there's a song called Running Up the Highway, which is kind of more straightforward hard rock, kind of that traditional UFO sound, kind of sounds cool. Revolution, the Kings of Leon song, kind of sounds cool because it's King of Leon-esque. But for the most part, there's some good musical moments, but the songs kind of no really strong, memorable hooks, nothing that's making me like really want to come back and revisit this album. So that's my number 9. High Stakes and Dangerous Men. My number 8 is You Are Here, their first one with Vinnie Moore from 2004, their 17th overall studio album. Also, Jason Bonham is on drums. Just a lot of really generic hard rock sounds. I think this is to the point I said earlier. I think it's like Schenker is much more sort of interwoven into every song with his leads, with his fills, with his licks. it just like Vinny, I think gets better after this album. There are albums that he's good on, but this one it just seems like we have these songs. Let's plug him in when we need him. He'll drop some solos. He's more interesting than Archer, but he still tends to shred just for the purpose of shredding. And I think there was a melodic edge to Shanker that made a lot of his songs more interesting. There's a couple of standouts on this album, but that's about it. Black Cold Coffee, kind of a cool, fast, almost an upbeat Queens of the Stone Age type vibe that really, really works. Kind of cool middle groove. A lot of these songs have like cool riffs or like a cool middle section, but then kind of don't have anything that's a hook or too strong in the melody. So I'm like not compelled to go back and listen. But the second song, Black Cold Coffee, is pretty cool. And then there's a song called Jello Man, which kind of sounds like this weird mix between ZZ Top and Rage Against the Machine. They keep going, Jello Man, Jello Man. Almost has this like angry Zach De La Rocha vibe. Some really good playing on here. But for the most part, it's all just kind of average, just generic kind of hard rock. The opening song reminds me of something, but it's kind of a good start. We're kind of a little bit of that melodic UFO, but then after that, we get like solid open riffs, and then we get into the song, and it's like, okay, this isn't really that interesting of a song. Get a shout out to Corpus Christi here in Texas, which is pretty cool. But other than that, yeah, there wasn't much on here that I was compelled to go back and listen to again. So that's my number 8, You Are Here. My number 7 is their final studio album, A Conspiracy of Stars. Came out in 2015, their 21st. There's an improvement over the ones I just talked about. It seems like the best part of this is there are solo moments where Vinny seems to get chance to like stretch out for a little longer, which allows him to slow down. I think he's falling into a more sort of Shanker type style where the solos, while they still have this shred element, have this more melodic element that integrates better into the song. There's a lot of just sort of competent hard rock on here, but I think it's more interesting than the ones I just talk about. The highlights, there's a song called Sugarcane, which Vinny solos have this nice sort of looser, jammier quality that don't just feel like, hey, you're in for 4 bars, hit it hard, leave. Just feels a little more relaxed. In fact, there's the middle section of this album, Sugarcane, Devil's in the Detail, which is this really nice, fun song. This might be a playlist song. This is actually pretty good and dynamic and some nice grooves, kind of catchy. Precious Cargo is pretty cool. Has a really nice, chill instrumental section in the middle that absolutely works. And then towards the end, we get a song called Messiah of Love, which just has this like the swag that a Messiah of Love should have when talking about oneself. Vinny's doing some really excellent like rhythm stuff during the vocals that stands out. That's pretty cool. But everything else on here is just kind of just competent hard rock. A solid ending definitely doesn't harken back, doesn't rise up to the level of the late 70s, of the 70s or the early 80s, but not a bad way to go out. My number 7, A Conspiracy of Stars. My number 6 is The Visitor, 2009, their 19th, with Vinny. A lot of this seems to like be flirting with ZZ Top meets Widespread Panic energy. That sort of, there's a southern rock aggressive edge to this that Widespread Panic has, that I think they're flirting with that energy on a lot of these songs, which is interesting. A lot more of a bluesy slide vibe on some of these, kind of a grittier, like some of the vocals have that really growl to them that remind me of some of the best Widespread. A lot of just hard rock stuff. I think the highlights, a song called Rock Ready, which is this really nice slide bluesy riff. It's just 3 minutes of fun. Probably I think it's the shortest track on here. Another song called Living Proof, which also starts off with kind of a slower slide infested 70s groove. Then we drop into a more upbeat groove, but it's still kind of like laid back with some more just going off shredding. Song called Forsaken, which is pretty good. The opening chords kind of remind me of Beast of Burden. Kind of cool. There's a gentleness to the song. It's one of probably the more airier, cheesier pop numbers on here, but it works. It's just some good gentleness that's work. And then we just get some hard rockers. Kind of generic at times, not bad, a couple highlights. It seems like they're more committed to this weird southern rock edge, this widespread panic thing with a little bit of that ZZ Top kind of tight riffage that works in their favor. But yeah, an okay album. My number 6, The Visitor. My number 5 is Sharks. I hope you paid attention to that album cover I just left on for longer than the others, because that thing's something special. They're number 16, their last was Shanker. Shanker saves many a song here. We just have there's a number of just generic hard rockers that, if not for Shanker's presence and what he's doing on guitar, would probably be just even more generic. But he saves a lot of the songs. We do get some bluesy rock and stuff. The opening Outlaw Man, we have James Dean riding next to me and Steve McQueen is one of the lyrics. Opening song is pretty kind of cool. The second song, Quicksilver Rider. The intro of this kind of sounds like Analog Kid by Rush. Has this really cool, tight, upbeat groove with some really good soloing. The second song, Serenity, has this kind of ballady intro, then drops into this absolutely incredible riff. Then we get kind of this slow grind and rock groove. The song ultimately maybe doesn't pay off with the ballady intro and the awesome riff, but there's some really cool stuff throughout this entire thing. Kind of flirts with a cashmere groove at times, just that dun 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 dun. Not as heavy as that, but we're kind of getting there. Dead Man Walking has this almost like Kinks-esque, early Kinks kind of riff, you really got me type thing, that kind of tight riff. A song called Sea of Faith. Kind of sounds like Island in the Sun by Weezer, just this kind of nice little, like really nice and breezy, but nice and tight. Yeah, great melody to this song. He keeps saying, I'm just here to watch, I'm going to forget the way he sings it, but I'm just here to watch the river flow, this repeated line that Mog sings. It's incredible. Yeah, some of these songs have really cool middle solo sections when Shanker gets to step up. We close out with Hawaii, a nice little short, moody instrumental. Not a bad album. I think it has its moments. I think Shanker sounds fantastic. Just some of it's a little just too hard rock meh, but some highlights. Not that bad of an album. My number 5, Sharks. That album cover, people, though. That album cover. My number 4 is Seven Deadly. I think the entire band is back, or the classic 70s lineup, including the original drummer, are back. The only one who's different is Moore is still here. I really like this one more so than the ones I talked about, because it has this mellower vibe at times in which they seem to just be a little more relaxed and like not as rushed in what they do, and I think it works. There's a middle section of songs that I think lean into that in a really good way. Again, we're floating with that sort of pseudo widespread panic vibe, which works on the heavier songs. Second song, Wonderland, just is really almost like a bluesy Judas Priest type vibe, kind of a nice early 80s heavy metal groove seeps in there. Mojo Town, we got some mojo in this. You can feel the mojo, some nice sort of scrappy guitar playing. Angel Station has this almost flirting with Pearl Jam type balladry that absolutely works. Year of the Gun, kind of cool, laid back, almost that widespread panic vibe. It particularly reminds me of a song on Don't Tell the Band, but I can't remember what song it is. But a couple of those songs on Don't Tell the Band really are just these really kind of laid back grooves. It reminds me of one of those songs. One of the closing songs, The Fear, has this really nice melodic playing by Vinny where he's tapping into that Shanker type style. It's not just shredding, but it's more focused on like bringing a melodic aspect to the solo. Also flirts with like a 90s ZZ Top vibe, that electronic overproduced side, but in a better way. This is just not a bad album. I had their last album at 7. This is their second to last album at 4. They weren't necessarily getting better, but they were still putting out some stuff that was, while not reinventing any wheel, was still some pretty satisfying hard rock. So yeah, my number 4 would be their 20th, Seven Deadly. Came out in 2000 and, I don't remember, 12, I believe? I think 12. All right, I should have looked that up. I'm pretty sure it's 2012. All right, yeah, on to number 3. My number 3 is their 18th, 2006's Monkey Puzzle. I think this is the first one that is like 4/5 of the classic lineup. Everybody but Shanker is here, Moore being the guitar player. No Bonham. Andy Parker is back on drums. Bonham was on the previous one. It's a pretty strong album. There's some pretty strong tracks on this thing. We get some okay hard rock to open it up, but then the second song, Heavenly Bodies, nice kind of bass driven energy. Then the guitar comes in, really nice tight groove, some nice shred and more. Got a song called Black and Blue, which is just this nice big rock opening into this stomping groove. Lots of interesting parts. There's some electric piano that comes in here that is absolutely essential and should be used much more often in these songs. Provides a really interesting contrast to everything else. A song called Down by the River, which is just a couple like shorter, more solos that seem to drop in between verses that are really engaging. Just some nice upbeat, tight, melodic hard rocker. Rolling Man has a really good groove. What is it? There's a line about she's got the magic touch. She's half crazy. She's half Dutch. That's a fantastic line. Some great Vinny energy in this. The closing Kingston Town, which is not a reggae song, they get points for that. Great keyboard work, kind of a low key, intense burning rocker. There's some good stuff in here. I think Vinny's stretching out in a slightly better energy. We got some electric piano, some slightly diverse sounds coming in. They're not really doing anything dramatically different, but they're mixing it up a little. Some slightly proggy stuff entering in like the middle of Who's Fooling Who. So yeah, it kept me engaged more so than the other ones on this list. Not a great hard rock album, but definitely something that's enjoyable. My number 3, The Monkey Puzzle. My number 2 is Covenant. Their 15th came out in 2000. Shanker is back. He was back for the previous album too, but then he left during the previous album's tour. But now he's back again. Shanker returns for a second time. Yeah, it's just my top 2 are Shanker albums. Dunbar's on this, Ainsley Dunbar, another Zappa connection. There's a second CD to this that is live music. I think it's from the Walk on Water tour. I'm not going to review that. There's just some good songs on here. I think Shanker's presence just immediately rising tide. He's the rising tide that lifts all these songs. Dunbar's drum sound is kind of flat. I have an issue with that. It kind of, maybe I just get used to it by the end of the album, but it really bothers me on some of the first couple songs. But there's some nice upbeat energy. We get the melodic guitar playing of Shanker, though he is much more of a shredder and much more leaning into sort of heavy metal ton of tropes in some of his solos. A little bit different than his 70s sound. Excellent song called Fool's Gold, which is this nice sort of slower, flirting with ballady vibe that about midway through just drops into this monstrous riff that is absolutely amazing. Then like Shanker starts to solo. We go back into some more restrained vocals, but it's still a pretty interesting composed song. The Smell of Money, really nice and aggressive, really nice and playful, some good driving energy. There's a lot of high-speed riffage throughout that really works. Serenade, it's a song called Serenade that reminds me of Steve Miller's Serenade. It's got that kind of guitar groove. Really interesting that it reminds me of that. Song called the closing song, The World and His Dog. Some more like just high speed riffage where may almost kind of want to actually bang your head when you're listening to it. Some cool sort of guitar driven bass breakdown in the middle. That's kind of neat. A number of generic tracks, but there are a number of tracks that are just a little more high speed, a little more high voltage, a little more where you might actually want to bang your head a little, and that's a good thing. Shanker sounds fantastic. And even some of the slower things are hitting on this one. So, yeah, relatively one of the more consistent albums of the 90s and on. My number 2, Covenant. My number 1 is 1995's Walk on Water. Came out in their 14th album, came out in 1995. It's the first one with Shanker is back, and then he would quit, and then he would come back. I'm not one of those people. I've discovered that there are people who think if it's not Michael Shanker on guitar, it's not UFO. I'm not one of those people. It just turns out that the top 2 albums are Shanker albums. But really, what's happening on these albums is really not much different than anything that's happening on like a Vinnie Moore album or the one with Lawrence. They're all hard rock. They're all kind of mining the same field of music. It's just the songwriting's a little better. I think these are heavier songs than the previous albums. The one Schenker wasn't on. They did re-record Doctor Doctor and Lights Out, and they dropped those at the end of the album. I'm not even going to touch those. There's no reason to ever do that. But I think it maybe shows the excitement they had to get back together, and I think maybe that excitement is a little bit palpable on some of these songs. The opening, Self-Made Man, you can definitely feel a little more of a metal edge, a little more of a shredder edge to what Schenker is doing, but it's got great vocal riff. It's got some great melodies throughout. It's nice and heavy. At times it feels like just traditional UFO type hard rock. It's a really strong start. The second song, Venus, we almost have some Deep Purple-esque keyboard sounds that come into this almost like ballady groove that the song is okay, but then we get some really tasty Schenker playing. Push to the Limit, just a nice tight riff rocker that doesn't do much, but has some nice keyboards in there that subtly add to the flavor. Stopped by a Bullet of Love, despite the horrible title, pretty good song. Kind of reminds me of Fleetwood Mac's World Turning, but just a little more aggressive. Just this cool, propulsive, like always moving forward type vibe. Darker Days is a hard rock song. Running on Empty, some really screaming Schenker guitar. It bits some more like mid-tempo, poppier type stuff. Knock Knock is hard rock. And then Dreaming of Summer closes out with this nice kind of slow driving groove. It's kind of this patient, epic song that really doesn't go anywhere over the course of it, but it just, all of it kind of works and you just kind of sit in it and enjoy it. Some really nice Schenker playing in there. Don't think this album competes with, well, you'll see, because I'm going to put up the list after this. But anyways, for the 90s and beyond, this is my number one, 1995's Walk on Water. That is what those 9 look like in typewritten form. Yeah, that's it. I just talked about them. You know why I rank them in that way? If I were to roll these 9 into all of the others I've done from the 70s and 80s, that list looks like this. I still have those last 2 80s albums at the bottom. I just think those are low points. High Stake, the ones I've done here, then pretty much all just fall in between UFO 2 and those 2. I just plop that list right in the middle. I think UFO 2, it's ambitious, it's space rock, it's more compelling, even though I think it is too ambitious, that it overreaches, and the original guitar player didn't have quite what it takes to sustain that. I think it's a far more interesting album than all this other stuff. But yeah, that's how I would do it. And still, all the 70s albums and those first 3 80s albums, I would put in there. So the top 10 is all 70s and 80s. For me, for my ears, for when I want to go back and listen to this and I look at this list, it's really, really just those top 9 that I think are the things that call back to be revisited. And then we just get more and more just doing what other people kind of do. And every once in a while there's highlights. Yeah, but those are my rankings. Those are my thoughts. Thank you for watching. Leave me your thoughts on these albums, what I messed up on, why I'm wrong, why you like these albums. I'm going to eventually do some Michael Schenker group stuff and follow some MSG. I'm also really intrigued by Scorpions' first UFO 70s battle. I think I'm going to drop a video on that in the next couple weeks because I've been really getting back into the Scorpions as I'm listening to UFO and doing a little one-to-one comparison. Their 70s discography is remarkably similar, and I just want to address that on a timeline basis. But anyways, that's for another video. But yeah, that's it. I'm done. Glad I got into UFO. Really, really enjoyed those 70s albums. Like the first 3 80s albums. That live album is a beast. So this has been a good experience. Not sure how often I'll revisit anything from 90s and on. It's just a couple playlist tracks, but for the most part, there's better hard rock out there, I would argue. Though this isn't bad. It's just, it is what it is. It's like, we know what we're getting with UFO in the 90s and the 2000s. All right, I'm rambling. Thanks for watching. Peace. Talk to you later.